Revelation of Jesus Christ. Chapter 2, verses 18 to 29, Church of Thyatira. Overview. The church in Thyatira practiced Christian love, faith, and their works were good. However, they tolerated a certain self-proclaimed prophetess who taught sexual immorality, seduced men of church, and taught about Satan in positive light. Unless she and her followers repent, they will experience sicknesses and distress, and her children will die of an incurable disease. Those who had not followed her, should stay as they are. Those who stop following her will be rewarded, by having them lead the non-Christians who refuse to follow the beast, into the millennium reign of Christ on earth. Verse 18. To the angel of the church in Thyatira, write. The Son of God with eyes of flame of fire, and feet like fine bronze, says this. Comments on verse 18. Thyatira was a commercial city, notably a home of Lydia of Philippi, a trader for the royal purple. The city where Apollo was worshipped as sun god, was of no political importance. Thyatira had no emperor worship and Christians were not persecuted for refusing to burn incense in emperor temples. However, the church became known for sexual immorality and loose teachings, led by a false prophetess and the cult of the Nicolaitans. Christ identifies himself by a title that defines the character and the weight of judgment for that particular church. Son of God. His judgment of Thyatira is based on what he taught on earth as the Son of Man, while he himself was the Son of God. Eyes of flame of fire. Refers to anger concerning the church of Thyatira. Eyes glow in anger. Feet like fine bronze. Bronze, as in the altars of bronze, or fire, were used for purification. See notes on Revelation 1 verse 15. Whenever God visits in person, ground gets purified. The ground upon which Christ steps also needs purification. When Christ came to John in Revelation 1 verse 15, his feet were like burning bronze, for the ground upon which Christ was standing had to be purified. Since bronze feet indicate stepping on the ground, it means that Christ would come in person to judge the Thyatira church. He also came in person when he knocked at the doors of the church of Laodicea. Comments on Christ on earth today. Christ walks the earth today. Whenever Christ walks the earth, he does so in secret. He visits Christians and churches. God has visited earth many times. It was done so in an invisible way, like when he appeared in the flame of the burning bush in a form of the angel of the Lord and identified himself as God of Abraham. The 1 Kings 19 verse 11 also teaches that God could be found in the wind, earthquake, and other manifestations. Such manifestations resemble natural manifestations, but they are not always of nature. As an example, the flame in the bush did not consume the bush. Verse 19. I see your works, your love, service, faith, and patient endurance. And your latter works are greater than the former. Verse 20. But I hold this against you. You allow the woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess and teaches and seduces my servants to practice sexual immorality and to eat food sacrificed to idols. Note. Seduces. Strong's 4105, go astray, mislead, seduce. Usually rendered as, go astray, mislead, but the context here is, seduce. Comments on verse 19. The judgment of the Thyatiran church, as well as of every church, revolves around her works. Here, Christ evaluates the deeds, hard work and endurance of the Thyatirans. They led a Christian way of life of love, service, faith and endurance. And unlike the Ephesian church, their latter works increased in quality. This was undoubtedly due to love, which the Ephesians lacked. Comments on verse 20. This church was tolerant of sin. The leadership of the church was apparently weak and morally defeated. They allowed sexual immorality and adultery among the members under a leadership and teaching of a charismatic teacher and false prophetess, who called herself Jezebel. Apostle Paul also had to counter yet another form of sexual perversion in the Corinthian church. In today's churches, the tolerance for sexual immorality is more widespread than it was then. Many more churches today turn a blind eye towards living arrangements between unmarried members, or same-sex relationships and even same-sex marriages. That false prophetess named herself Jezebel after the historical Jezebel, the wife of Ahab. Since she was her follower, she intended to separate Christians from Christ, the way Balaam and Balak did to the Israelites. See comments on Revelation 2 verse 14. She did so by teaching a practice of sacrificing foods to idols, followed by a feast of eating that food and usually followed by sexual immorality. See comments on Revelation 2 verses 14 to 15. Jezebel herself was also seducing Christians of that church into sexual immorality and specifically, adultery. Verse 21. I have given her time so she might change her ways, and she is not willing to turn from her sexual immorality. Verse 22. Behold, I throw her on a sickbed and those who commit adultery with her into great distress, unless they turn from her works. Verse 23. I will kill her children with certain death. And every church will see that I am the one who examines inmost thoughts and hearts. And I will give to each of you according to your works. Note, kill with certain death. Per Vincent, to kill with death is a very strong expression. Compare Leviticus 20 verse 10. Literally, let them be put to death with death. Comments on verse 21. God gave Jezebel time to repent, to change her mind about practicing sexual immorality, but she refused. When a Christian refuses to repent, God usually makes him stop that sin one way or another. Comments on verse 22. She is confined to bed due to long illness. The bed where she committed sexual immorality becomes her sickbed. Adultery is an intimate relation between individuals of whom one of them is married to someone else. Everyone who was intimate with her was told to have committed adultery. This means that either Jezebel was married and her husband was disabled or separated from her, or she was single and in habit of seducing married men. Or they all had other marriage partners. Everyone who was involved with her will go through great distress, unless they condemn what she does. Comments on verse 23. Her children will die a certain death. This literally means, to kill with death. It appears that this term points to an incurable disease. King Ahab, the historical Jezebel's husband, also had his children punished by death. Since her teaching spread to most of the churches, the news of the severity of her punishment must also be spread wide. Many who were wondering how she and her followers were getting away with it, will get the news of the judgment. Verse 24. But to the rest of you in Thyatira, who do not follow this teaching and who have not experienced, as they say, the deep things of Satan, I say, I do not lay on you any other burden. Verse 25. Nevertheless, hold on to what you have, until I come. Comments on 24. The deep things of Satan are teachings about the characteristics and deeds of Satan that the false teachers promote in positive light. They make Satan out to be trustworthy and fair. The term, as they say, indicates that Thyatirans are not even ashamed to say openly that they are being taught about Satan. Prior to Satan's expulsion from heaven, he was called the morning star and Lucifer, meaning light bringer, or in Greek, dawn bringer. Since the time when Satan deceived Eve, he always pretended to be a positive figure. 2 Corinthians 11 verses 14 to 15 refers to Satan as the one who pretends to be good, saying, and no wonder, for even Satan masquerades as an angel of light. It is no great thing therefore if his servants also masquerade as servants of righteousness. Christians who did not get involved in these cultic teachings, are asked to stay away from such teachings and continue as they did before in love, service, faith and patient endurance. Comments on verse 25. Christians need to hold on to works, love, service, faith and patient endurance, as per verse 19. Remarks concerning Satanic Temples. In Satanic temples there are statues displaying Satan with goat's head and feet, and smiling children looking at him with adoration. In other images, children dance naked around that individual. But the true identity of Satan, who is also called the devil, the serpent or the evil one, is an envious, deceptive, divisive and destructive figure. Verse 26. And the one who overcomes and keeps my works until the end, to him I will give authority over the nations. Verse 27. He will shepherd them with an iron staff, as the broken vessels of clay, just as I have received authority from my Father. Comments on verse 26. God rewards Christians who repent from following such teachings, stop sexual practices associated with it and do good works for the rest of their lives. Authority over nations refers to the 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth. Christians of Thyatira, similar to the Christians of Philadelphia, together with Christians of all times who overcame similar difficulties, will rule together with Christ on earth for 1,000 years. See comments on Church of Philadelphia, chapter 3 verse 10, concerning ruling with Christ on earth for 1,000 years. Comments on verse 27. At Christ's second coming, people of all nations who worship the beast, will rise against Christ and he will shatter them with iron rod. However, those who did not worship the beast, survive the great destruction and find themselves in the 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth. They are compared to broken vessels. Christians of Thyatira who overcame satanic teachings and sexual immorality that comes with it, will come together with Christ at his second coming and shepherd the survivors with the iron rod of Christ, but now as broken vessels, through the 1,000 years. The same iron rod that shattered the enemies, now heals the repentant, in the 1,000-year reign. Verse 28. And I will give him the morning star. Verse 29. Anyone who inclines the ear, hears what the Spirit says to the churches. Comments on verse 28. In astronomy, the morning star is a star that appears just before sunrise. Poetically speaking, it escapes the darkness of the night into the sunlight. When the morning star rises in the heart, the darkness of heart disappears. 2 Peter 2 verse 19 refers to that, saying, You do well when you turn your attention to prophetic word as to a lamp that shines in a murky place, till the daylight glimmers through and the morning star rises in your hearts. The one who has the title of the morning star has authority over people. Satan was the first who was given the title of the morning star to rule over nations. However, he misused his authority and God took it away from him. Isaiah 14 verse 12 refers to that, saying, How you have fallen from heaven, O star of the morning, son of the dawn. You have been cut down to the earth, you who were leading the nations. After that, the title was given to Christ when he was glorified as God and man in one. Then, Christ promised the authority of the title to the overcomers of sexual immorality. They in turn, may use it to shepherd the broken vessels of people who escaped Satan into the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Comments on verse 29. To incline the ear and to hear what the Spirit says to the churches means that any Christian who pays attention will understand the problems and solutions for the church of Thyatira. Sexual immorality is a part of Satan's teachings and it keeps people close to him. When we practice such things, we follow Satan and our hearts are heavy with darkness. To walk the streets of heaven with no darkness in heart, is a blessed spiritual state. People who came out of such practices, will receive the morning star. It is the same star that is received by Christians in heaven who had led a decent Christian life on earth, without ever committing sexual immorality.